Hello, and welcome to Psychology 111. In this session, we will begin our exploration of the topic of cognition. The next two sessions will follow the outline shown, beginning with the question, what is cognition? Cognition can be defined as the use of mental abilities to process information. Processing information might involve acquiring information, communicating information, or applying information. The second question to be addressed is, what are the mental abilities involved in processing information? There are many such abilities. We will look at just 6. The first of these is representation. Representation is the depiction of information in the mind. It is the form that information takes in our minds. Information can take the form of mental images, pictures in our heads. These are known as analog representations. Information can also take the form of words, units of language. These are known as symbolic representations. For example, we all know what a large striped cat looks like. We have images of them stored in our minds. And we all know that the name of this animal is a tiger. We have a word for them stored in our minds. As we have said, analog representations are mental images. They are pictures in our heads. Analog representations are useful in many situations. For example, look at this map. Now try and answer the question. By conjuring up a mental image of the map, you can answer the question correctly. You would have to travel northeast to get from the beach bar to the coffee house. Now look at this face. Is it the same or different to the one on the following slide? By conjuring up a mental image of the face you saw previously, you can correctly answer that the two faces are different. Now look at the parking lot photo. Will the car fit into the space? By moving the objects around in your head, you can answer the question correctly. Yes, the car will fit in the parking space. These exercises illustrate that analog representations are very useful for spatial location, recognition, and mental animation tasks. However, despite being very useful, mental images are not perfect. For example, to answer the question, what words are written on the Washington's head side of the current dollar bill, you would need to conjure up an image of a dollar bill. Do this now and try and answer the question. It is likely that some of the words were visible in your mental image, but not all of them. This illustrates the fact that often our mental images lack adequate detail. This is because we only encode information that is useful in everyday life. With a dollar bill, people tend to only encode details such as the words $1 and United States of America, because this is all that we need in everyday life. We need to be able to distinguish between $1 notes, $5 notes, $10 notes, and $20 notes. And we need to be able to distinguish between US notes and foreign notes. All the other details are irrelevant. Having looked at analog representations, we can now look at symbolic representations. Symbolic representations are the words we use to represent information in the mind. They are units of language. Symbolic representations are useful in many situations. For example, the questions shown cannot be answered using mental images. In order to answer them, you must have a vocabulary. That is, symbolic representations allow us to think about abstract notions such as affect, influencing someone's feelings, effect, to influence outcomes, earliness, doing something before a specialized time, or arithmetic, manipulating numbers. A second mental ability involved in processing information is organization. Organization is the structuring of information in the mind. Imagine you wrote down every fact that you ever learned on a separate card, shuffled the cards, and then threw them to the ground. Then someone asked you, which city was the Declaration of Independence signed? How would you find the relevant card? It would be very hard. Even worse, imagine you had to write an essay on the Declaration of Independence. How would you find all of the associated information? It would be almost impossible. However, if the cards were filed in a logical system, then the process would be much easier. Organizing information in the mind allows us to retrieve that information efficiently. The mind organizes knowledge into concepts. Concepts are mental groupings of similar things. They are categories. For example, we all have a concept of dogs. Every category has individual members. These are known as examples. For instance, the dog category might consist of Alsatians, Collies, Poodles, Dalmatians, Dobermans, and Dachshunds, etc. The best example of a category, the most typical example, is the exemplum or prototype. The prototypical dog, the most dog-like dog, is probably something like a Labrador. Everybody has schema which accompany their concepts. A schema is a collection of basic knowledge that we have about a concept. For example, basic knowledge that we all have about dogs is that they have 4 legs, a tail, and fur, and also that they bark. Basic knowledge that we have about categories of people are known as stereotypes. For example, students tend to be young, intelligent, and motivated. Basic knowledge that we know about how to behave in social situations are known as scripts. For example, when making a phone call, one is expected to say hello, introduce oneself, have a conversation, and then say goodbye. The mind arranges concepts into networks. Networks are hierarchies of concepts with their associated schema. For example, a large concept, such as animals, might be subdivided into smaller categories, such as bird, fish, and mammals, and a smaller category, such as mammals, might be subdivided into even smaller categories, such as dogs, cats, horses, and cows. A third mental ability involved in the processing of information is language. Language is a system of communication that involves using words or signs in a structured way. All true languages have three features in common. All true languages are symbolic. They use words or signs to represent ideas and things. For example, a person might use the word book or place their palms together and open them to represent printed pages bound together. All true languages are generative. They use a limited amount of symbols to produce an inexhaustible number of messages. It is estimated that there are just over 1 million words in the English language. The average person has a vocabulary of about 25,000 words. However, these words can be combined in so many different ways that the number of possible messages that can be produced is almost infinite. Finally, all true languages are grammatical. They have rules that govern the pronunciation, construction, and ordering of words. Phonological rules govern how words are pronounced. The human voice box is capable of producing about 100 basic sounds. These are known as phonemes. The English language uses about 40 of these. For example, there are basic b, k, d, g, h, s, and w sounds. Hence, the correct way to pronounce the word bison is with a s sound in the middle. Many Midwesterners mispronounce the word bison with a z sound in the middle as bison. When people deviate from the correct pronunciation of words, they are said to have an accent. Morphological rules govern how words can be constructed. Words consist of units of meaning. These are known as morphemes. For example, the word friend has one morpheme. The word friendly has two morphemes. The ly implies action. And the word unfriendly has three morphemes, the un implying a negative. Words consist of word stems to which additions can be made. Certain additions can only be tagged onto the end of word stems. These are known as suffixes. Other additions can only be added to the start of word stems. These are known as prefixes. Friendly is a correctly constructed word as the suffix is at the end, whereas friend is not a correctly constructed word as the suffix has been placed at the beginning. Syntactical rules govern how words can be ordered. For example, in the English language, adjectives must go before nouns. Hence, it is grammatically correct to say the unfriendly bison. It is grammatically incorrect to say the bison unfriendly. The study of the meaning of individual words, the meaning of full sentences, or the meaning of entire discourses is known as semantics. A fourth mental ability involved in the processing of information is problem solving. Problem solving is thinking that is directed towards puzzling out conundrums. One highly influential theory of problem solving is Newell and Simon's problem space theory. This theory holds that problem solving involves getting from an initial state to a goal state by performing a sequence of mental or physical actions. These mental or physical actions are known as operations. For example, one can arrive at the solution to the math problem shown by performing a sequence of mental actions, adding 4 plus 3 plus 9. Or one can arrive at the solution to a Rubik's Cube by performing a sequence of physical actions, twisting rows and columns clockwise and counterclockwise in the required order. According to problem space theory, our ability to solve problems is influenced by numerous factors. Attempt the exercise shown. Navigate the two mazes. This exercise illustrates one factor that influences our ability to solve problems. That is, one factor that influences our ability to solve problems is the search space. The search space is the number of possible moves we are faced with when trying to find a solution. In the first maze, there are only 11 possible routes, so it is quite easy to navigate. Whereas in the second maze, there are many possible routes, so it is a little harder to navigate. With a Rubik's Cube, there are millions of possible moves, so the problem is very difficult to solve. Now try to solve the math problems shown. Some people will find the problem easy, others much harder. This exercise illustrates another factor that influences our ability to solve problems. That is, another factor that influences our ability to solve problems is knowledge level. The more relevant information we have about a problem, the easier we find it to solve. For example, if we know the order in which operators in a math expression should be carried out, parentheses, exponents, division, multiplication, addition, then subtraction, then it is easy to solve the problem. If we don't have this knowledge, then it is hard to solve the problem. Now try this third exercise. Most people find it very hard to solve the problem until they're given a hint. The hint being that arrangements can take a three-dimensional form. This exercise illustrates that a third factor of representational skills can influence our ability to solve problems. Being able to conceptualize problems in the correct way makes them easier to solve. Now try this exercise. This problem is impossible to solve unless you can think of an alternative use for one of the objects. You must be able to see that the box could be used as a tray. This exercise illustrates that functional fixedness can also influence our ability to solve problems. Functional fixedness is the inability to perceive a new use for an object previously associated with some other purpose. Now try this final exercise. When answering the third question, many people will immediately come up with the answer needle and thread. That is, they will automatically use the method that they have used in the past. Automatically doing things in the same way that you have done them in the past prevents you from seeing alternative methods, such as using a stapler instead of a needle and thread. This exercise illustrates that problem-solving set can also influence our ability to solve problems. Problem-solving set is a type of mental set. Mental set is getting hung up on previously learned ways of doing things. Problem-solving set is getting stuck in your ways of solving problems.